Thanks to the Wrecking Ball rework, most tanks are now actually pretty decent this season, but even so, the top tanks massively outclass the lower tiers, and there's a lot of rock paper scissors to be played. There are a lot of hard counters. So let's get into the tank tier list of Season 10. If you're looking to rank up on your favorite heroes, check out the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can level up your game and help you get better, faster. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Starting at F tier, Roadhog has somehow gotten worse, and the main reason why he's worse than before is that Orisa and Manga are both strong enough to counter him and still farm the enemy team at the same time. And although Hog would be performing a lot better without those two in the game, he still just doesn't tank for his team. He just feeds. The Wrecking Ball rework makes it pretty clear that there are a lot of ways to change a selfish ability into a team buff. There even was an experimental patch way back, where Hog's breather would even apply a 25% damage reduction to teammates close to him and a 25 heal per second. Although that's not the change I'd like to see, it's at least something that allows him to protect his teammates during rotations or when sustaining a dive. He doesn't need to have a scrap shield or mobility, but he's gotta have something. The rework didn't give him any meaningful new utility. He can't even tactically use his pigpen to slow heroes like Ratra can with his vortex. It's too obvious and takes too long to set up. Not to mention that he doesn't have anything to protect himself with to play aggressively. He's very weak compared to other tanks, but as a tank in Overwatch 2, he does win almost any 1v1. But with no mobility to set up duels, the best he can do is usually just shoot the enemy tank. It's just that every other ground tank has more mitigation, and every dive tank can easily avoid him. He's so bad that we're moving 2 whole tiers up to C tier, and it's Reinhardt next. Despite the recent Earthshatter buffs, it's not actually enough to make him even a little more playable. The reason he's not so good isn't because Earthshatter doesn't get enough value when you hit it, although it's definitely a lot better now and should have been a 3-second stun a long time ago. Reinhardt's neutral is very basic, so he deserves a strong ultimate that demands to be blocked. It's never boring to see a massive Earthshatter, but hitting the shatter in the first place is the hard part. And although 5 extra meters on the range helps, it's not often that barely missing heroes at the edge of the shatter made a difference. He still can't close distance on his own. Charge doesn't really count, but if you can't hit a pin and survive the walk back to your team, then game is game. But although his shield lasts a long time compared to other shield tanks, he can't do anything during it, which wouldn't be a problem if not for how effective the other shield tanks are at dealing damage while shielding. It's not always about how long the shield is up, but about how much you can do before it breaks. And without a Lucio, Ryan doesn't walk his team up fast enough. Other tanks benefit from synergies like Ball with Tracer or Winston with Ana, but not as much as Reinhardt, keeping him tragically low in the tier list. But now it's time for B tier, with almost half of the tanks being decent, but overshadowed by the real top dogs. First up is Wrecking Ball, fresh off his new upgrades, but clearly they're not enough to make him significantly better. There is no doubt that he's stronger, having the option to buff his allies offensively or defensively, and somehow getting even more mobility. The 1-second refund on grapple allows for an easy slam no matter where you are on the map, to the point where you don't even need to learn how to wall jump. And you no longer have a maximum duration timer until you hit fireball speed. You have to look up when playing against Wrecking Ball now just in case he's waiting to drop on you, or stall the point undetected. But overall, the adaptive shield change just isn't intuitive enough, nor does it make Ball better at engaging. A lot of the time you don't actually have enough shields to give to your allies because it all gets broken while you're in the fight. He still gets booped, stunned, and even the fact that he donates his shield to his allies makes himself weaker in exchange when it does work. The buffs are good enough to make him strong in the right hands, but it's just way too easy to counter him. I really have to emphasize that he's a lot better, but just not enough to beat out his counters, like the next hero on B tier, Manga. It's been rough since he got nerfed from his overpowered state, but Cardiac Overdrive still has the same effect, and his damage is unrivaled. But just like before the patch that made him a must pick, he's forced to shoot the enemy tank to avoid slowly dying before engaging. He has the potential to beat tanks higher up in the list if they overextend or don't respect the Cardiac Overdrive, but it's the matchup into the rest of the heroes in the game that keep him down. High spam heroes like Sojourn and elusive supports like Kiriko make it so hard for Manga to finish the fight before giving the enemy team a bunch of chances to finish the fight themselves. Overdrive is great, but it's very baitable, and without it Manga is a massive feeder and pretty much has to leave unless the enemy tank is still fighting you up close. It may seem weird that he's no better than Winston, the next tank in B tier, but our favorite wholesome guerrilla scientist hero is in one of his best states yet. He's just overshadowed by the easy value that the more grounded tanks get. His cleave damage is good, his leap mobility is fast and on a short cooldown, and his bubble is so effective at splitting resources and creating a safe zone for your team to play aggressive in. But in order to use all that, you need a lot of teamwork and a lot of experience. Winston can have unbelievably high impact, but he's also very easy to punish if your jumps aren't perfectly positioned. He's got a lot of armor now that allows him to contest even D.Va for a good while before being forced out, but it's also really hard to recover from taking too much damage. You don't want to waste your 12-second bubble just because you peeked 5 people for a split second. The only reason that he's better than Manga is that he can reposition much faster, leaving Manga without anyone to leech off of for his Berserker passive. Diving with bubble is probably the best diving gauge, but consistently doing it throughout the whole game when it's so easy to counter him isn't likely. Next up is Doomfist. He's not as effective at full committing to a dive, but his slam and punch are great for controlling space. Out of the 5 tanks with stuns, including Manga's inconsistent overrun, he's the one with the most mobility. He's not the most durable tank, but he is so threatening to DPS and supports when he suddenly appears next to them. The recent quality of life change doesn't matter very much, but his empowered punch is one of the best ways to start a fight. It's pretty easy to get a pick instantly. It's got 30 meters range and a little over 170 damage at max charge, and it flies fast. But he's in B tier for a reason. Not only are there a lot of ways to counter him, but all those counters are especially effective. Sombra and Cassidy alone make it so tough to commit to an advantage, and pretty much any hero with a skinny hitbox is especially resistant to his hand cannon damage. And his ultimate takes just a bit too long to build to be a consistent threat. He'll definitely feel better when the meta moves away from the unkillable front line that's so strong now, so it's just a matter of time before he's more viable across the board. And now for the top of B tier, it's Junker Queen. Her Carnage burst damage makes her dominant in the 1v1s again, and her spam is enough to compete against most other tanks, even the very top tier. Most players think Queen is all about using her shout to rush in, but her poke and knife pull are unbelievably strong. Using her to 3-2-1 into the enemy team is an easy way to troll one of the best spam neutrals out of all the tanks. Every knife you hit is a chance for a pick, even against tanks. It's easy to forget how strong hook and pull mechanics are when Roadhog has been so bad for so long, and Orisa can only do it during her ult. But the thing Queen is missing is the ability to match other frontline tanks head to head. She can spam them out from range, but if the fight gets up close and personal, she's a lot more vulnerable. Even with Carnage at close range, it's actually pretty hard to hit. You can get stunned, booped, or slowed, or all three. She's great into most tanks, but she is not allowed to hit her slashes against the top tanks. But even so, Jagged Blade is good enough that you can clutch up if you hit enough of them before your shout gets forced. Now onto A tier, and first up is Ratra. He's the classic reliable pick. A shield to take space or block abilities, close range domination with his pummel, and decent poke before the fight. That's really all you need as a tank, and he's also got a slow. It's what makes him so good into Queen, who would otherwise win the spam matchup. But he also has the same weakness as her. In close range he's insane, but unless you stack your shield and nemesis form, it can be easy to stave you off, and doing so leaves you massively weak after the 7-second duration. Ram's biggest problem is that he's outclassed by the other frontline tanks. His nemesis form can be completely negated by simple focus fire, and although his slow is good, it takes a while to cast, and there are a lot of abilities that can block the follow-up damage. He is a really good blueprint for a tank that's impactful without being too oppressive, but unfortunately there are at least 4 tanks that are impactful and oppressive, starting with the next tank in A tier, D.Va. She's still the most reliable dive tank because she doesn't have to commit to get value. Doomfist, Winston, and Wrecking Ball all need to use their slams and bubbles and punches to set their team up, whereas D.Va can just use Defense Matrix to do pretty much anything she wants. And with the shortest mobility cooldown out of all the tanks, even when she does go aggressive, she can easily dip back out. She's pretty difficult to get into, but she's one of the few heroes that's worth the practice, because every once in a while, she's the most impossible hero to play against. A massive chunk of armor, consistent mobility, and then just Defense Matrix. Her burst damage is also amazing combined with that consistent mobility, so she's even got clutch potential. She can really clean house in messy mid-fights. But Defense Matrix isn't impossible to beat. It doesn't work against beams, and it also only works for 3 seconds at a time. There are a lot of other tanks that can mitigate for longer while also being able to shoot. Like Zarya for example. She's our next tank, and although she's not the ideal sustained shielding and damage tank, she does it decent enough. She's actually only this high up because she's got a great matchup into the top tanks who both have great spam and matrix abilities. She can be countered by other tanks like Winston or even Ratra, but her friendly bubbles give her great synergy with DPS that can deal with bad tank matchups for you. Venture is actually a great bubble target, and it's really easy to tell when they're going to be needing it. Zarya's base damage is really good, and although it can be easy to get overrun by coordinated teams, it's not often that you'll be meeting coordinated teams. And when you do, just know that having a bubble left might not be enough. You need good spacing too, since one bubble isn't enough to save you if you're walled off or speed boosted on. And now for the top of A tier, it's Sigma. His shield buff doesn't mean much for his overall viability, but it's extra effectiveness with no real drawbacks. He's still in a great state, with decent spam, good control over close range with accretion, and a quickly deploying shield that's now even better at locking off far off sightlines faster. He's pretty hard to force out as he doesn't need to get too close or even expose himself too much to deal damage. And he is also kind of the only hero that can match Orisa, who to no big surprise to everyone keeping track of the tank so far, is the only tank in S tier right now. Sigma's Rock is one of the only stuns that can go through Orisa's Javelin Spin. Doomfist can do it too, but he's literally countered by Orisa in the lore and in the game. Even though you can cancel her spin, she's just too strong with her own stun, and then of course the most annoying ability in the game, Fortify. There are a lot of abilities in the running for that title, but as long as she has more than 40% damage reduction and a disgusting amount of 350 armor, it's just that good. But Fortify has always been good at keeping Orisa alive, even when she's not that strong. So the thing that's changed most recently to make her the most obvious best choice in pretty much any situation is 0 fall off on her damage, combined with how effective Spear is at long range. She's the one ground tank that can still do so much against high grounds and long ranges without actually contesting them physically. She can just spam from the objective and her damage adds up so fast that she's just pretty much unmatched. Her spin and spear keep anyone from getting too close, and when they are close, her damage is extra reliable. It can be really easy to confirm kills with a quick headshot burst after a javelin hit. Her ultimate used to be a weak spot, but the pull is amazing, and the quickly charging damage makes it really effective even when you can't get a high enough charge. She should definitely get some fall off on her weapon. Her spear is already really easy to hit, and a perfect setup for heroes like Sojourn and Echo to finish off the kill. She doesn't also need to be a long-range beamer to be an effective enabler. Orisa being so strong is definitely a big part of the reason why Wrecking Ball's rework hasn't made a big splash. When the meta gets more evened out, hopefully towards the mid-season patch, or even with a surprise hotfix when Blizzard realizes they totally forgot about how broken Orisa is, he'll feel a lot better and there will be a lot more tank diversity. When Orisa's good, she keeps a lot of other heroes bad. That's it for the tank tier list for Season 10. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.